therefore, do you think the position of governor is really gone? Because it was there to be very much involved with what was going on, and to the royal assent and all those sort of things. You representing the Queen. Do you think the Isle of Man's grown up to a point now?
There are formal aspects still. The signing off the legislation, which happens here in Isle of Man and doesn't happen elsewhere. I don't think it happens in Guernsey and Jersey. That is still done, unless, and it's only been very few occasions when the law has a special direct interest for the Crown, for the Queen, at the moment, or is something that if it affects the governor's, lieutenant governor's pay and rations, he's not allowed to sign it off either. But most things, I do sign off those. And then we had that extraordinary situation last year, where the only way for the government to do what they wanted to do was to proclaim a state of emergency. And because that hadn't for a long time, no one had looked at the legislation. It was pre-1930s legislation, which allowed them to do that. But again, the Lieutenant Governor acts entirely on the advice of the government, both in signing off that declaration of emergency every month, which we did for 3 months, and then in between time and running on afterwards, the individual decisions and individual regulations, because each of those needs the Lieutenant Governor's authority, or did. The system has changed now. As a result of that, it's changed. But that meant that there was some interesting stuff, and it was almost so fast-moving, and you got the amendment to the amendment to the amendment of a regulation. And I just hope that the good bailiffs in the court could make sense of it all when it came to having to sanction people who didn't follow the regulation.
You had to sign off on that, did you?
Yes, each time.
As representative of the Queen?
Yeah, once it had been through Comin, and when the Chief Secretary sent it to me, and then it was enacted, and he signed it off after I did. He enacted it, and it hadn't been to Tynwald, and the first time Tynwald met afterwards, they would look at it, and they could amend it. And quite interesting, they could and if they amended it, their amendments immediately took effect, and it happened once or twice. But those are details. The main thing was that the Lieutenant Governor had a constitutional role. At that point, the law has now changed for most of what would be involved again, if we get into that situation. Not quite everything, for most of it, to do that. And there are one or two other aspects. There is a role, it's quite interesting, in signing off the papers for third country nationals, i.e. people who are not British, living in the Isle of Man and want to take British nationality. And those papers come to me, come to the Lieutenant Governor of the day, to sign off. And we took a decision between us 2 or 3 years ago, checked with the government in London, confirmed that that's not something that the Lieutenant Governor can reliably, sensibly delegate in law. So I get a look at all the Europeans, South Africans, Americans, Asians who want to become British citizens and living in the Isle of Man. It's quite fun, actually. And there's a judgment there. Are these people of good character? And I have to vow that they are. Good character, of course, is not defined, so you have to make that up. You have to form your own view of what that is. But it's it's quite a telling part. It's quite a significant part of the workload. And again, the Cabinet Office prepare all the papers. They go through all the checks. The checks are just the authorities you'd expect there to be. But there's a pretty steady stream of people here who want to take British nationality. A lot of them will stay here for a long time. Then some of them will then have that British nationality and go elsewhere. But it's important to get it right, because what I have in my mind each time I sign off one of those is, imagine the worst happens, that in 3 years' time, one of these people is up in front of the judges in the Old Bailey for some horrendous crime or some great big fraud or whatever, and
your name's on the thing.
Someone says, where did the accused get his British or her British nationality from? And you have to be able to put your hand on their heart and say, yes, we was in the Isle of Man, but that was on exactly the same basis that it would be in the UK, that we all formed a view that this person would be a sound British citizen. Okay, they've gone off the rails since, but at the time they were on the rails.
So I said to you, though, do you think there's a point for a governor here in the Isle of Man?
That's for the island to decide.
Right.
The counties in England and Wales have a role that does something similar. It's not as extensive, and that is the Lord Lieutenants of the counties, the Queen's representatives, who turn out for a number of things, do honours, receptions and investitures, obviously turn out when members of the royal family visit those counties and do various other things. That's more honorific thing that comes late in their careers. I don't think they get paid for it, unlike the system here. But it is an element of that plus more. And if people form part of the monarch, if the monarch remains head of state, which is the case for the Crown dependencies as it is for the United Kingdom, then the monarch will probably want the representative, and that's something, the terms of that, for discussion between the Isle of Man government, who pays the bills.
Are you good value for money?
Well, I try to be quite transparent about this. Running this house, including the salaries of everyone here, including my own, is just over £500,000 a year. And I've been quite keen to not make that figure quite clear. It's there in the public accounts that the Treasury put out every year. And also to explain a bit about what we do. And what I've tried to say to different sectors, particularly the charities and the businesses during my 5 years here, is if you want to use Government House, because it's a bit special, it's different from just taking a big set of rooms in that hotel, in the case of businesses, I've said, for when visitors come, then come up, and if it costs anything significant, we'll bill you. And said the same to the charities when they've wanted to have receptions here. There are two sort of receptions the charities do in general. One is to say thank you to their supporters and members, and the other is to raise funds. They need to opt for one or the other. It's quite difficult to mix those two together. But when they do that, I say find a sponsor, so that sponsor can cover the cost of the food and the drink and the overtime. Don't take it out of your charity funds. If you're going to do that, I don't want you to come up, because that doesn't seem right. And they almost always do find a sponsor, because the Isle of Man is like that. People are very generous, companies and some individuals are keen to sponsor these remarkably active and charities which achieve a lot. So when I started saying that to companies, to what I call the outward-facing companies on the Isle of Man, companies which are either foreign-owned or sell their services or goods overseas, I thought they might say that they want to bring up some director, for a cup of coffee or lunch or whatever. And then the first of them rang up and said, "Yes, can we come to Government House?" I said, "What do you have in mind?" "Oh, the annual board dinner." Right. So I said, "Yes, but you need to leave a couple of extra spaces at the table. Don't fill it up. I mean, I'll be there. My wife probably be there. Leave a couple of other spaces so I can invite a couple of senior members of the government, as well as your visitors from Johannesburg, US, or whatever it is." And we did that a few times. And one of the frustrations of lockdown was during the first lockdown in the spring of last year, we'd lined up 5 of those events. But of course, it wasn't just the lockdown of where were we at, April, May. It was after that, the fact that people couldn't come to the island. So we didn't have those foreign directors and what have you coming here. It doesn't make a big difference, but what I wanted to do was try and say to those companies, their foreign leaders, if you like, the leadership when they came to the island, it's not just the business itself, it's not just the Isle of Man ministers whom you'll probably go and see, but it's a bit more Isle of Man more widely that welcome you here, the employment you bring, the economic activity that results from your presence, and in some way you can do that by having people at Government House. And for the charities, certainly this is something that maybe a lot of their supporters haven't been to Government House, and so we welcome them here. I did say to the businesses, I said, but if you think there's a wine cellar, as there might have been 100 years ago, you have to think again, send up a couple of cases of decent wine, or a case of wine ahead, and let it sit for a bit, and we'll drink that. And they all took that in good heart and did that as well. And we'd have done the same last spring. The new fellow, John Lorimer, he'll decide how he wants to do that. But I think if within that budget of just over £500,000 a year, if one can do a bit of that, charging up the charities or the businesses where that's sensible to do it, then you get more people here. Of course, a lot of people have been here for the Tynwald Garden Party, which doesn't involve us hosting, other than providing a reasonably well-cut lawn and some flowering flower beds, because that is the president of Tynwald's. But Steve Rodan has just finished his 5 years, decided that he would like to do it here. It's a convenient place. And of course, there's no charge. They come up here and they set up a marquee and they get their caterers in. They don't have to pay for the premises in any way. And so we've seen a lot of people have come to at least the gardens of Government House for that Timber party. And that's good. I think people who are interested, it's nice that they have a chance to come and have a look and get some flavour of the place. It's not ancient. Most of it was done in its present style. The building was finished off and changed, about 120 years ago or so. But it's different. And school children, when in the early days we went around quite a few parishes, and if you went to primary school, I'd say to them, if you want to, get your teachers to bring you up. That's sort of year 6, 5, 6 in the summer, and some of them did, and they'd sit on the floor here in the drawing room. We'd ask a few questions and have tea and biscuits, and then run around the garden. But some of the questions that came from them, how many chandeliers has this building got? Was a question that sits in my mind, and we'd set them a quiz, and they'd go around and identify how many kings and queens were hanging on the walls of the dining room. And so it's good. You go both ends, both the senior business people and the companies and their foreign contacts, owners, as I say, directors, and school children. Each lieutenant governor will set their own style, and with them and their spouse. For that, and we'll see what the Lorimers make of it. They're going to be enthusiastic. They are enthusiastic, and I think they're going to be active, but you'll see soon enough.